What if you could enhance your development process by removing dependencies and accelerating your workflow? Well, today here on Tech Talks Daily, I've got a special guest who has done just that. He is the co-founder and CEO of WireMock Cloud, and he's going to be joining us today to delve into the world of API mocking and its pivotal role in boosting developer productivity. And he's got a background that spans engineering, product management and sales, plus a wealth of experience in scaling startups and building robust sales organisations. And under his leadership, WireMock Cloud has grown into a critical tool for developers by simplifying the API lifecycle from design to testing. So today we're going to explore how API mocking can create isolated development environments, allow teams to work in parallel, and ultimately innovate faster. And we'll also dive into WireMock's journey from open source project to commercial powerhouse, discussing their unique go-to-market strategies and the value that they bring to their customers. So whether you are a developer looking to better streamline your workflow, or just curious about the latest in API technology, this episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. Now, this daily tech podcast does involve many costs, so a big thank you to the sponsor for their invaluable support of Tech Talks Daily. One of the things that I'm reading more and more about lately is defence contractors are facing immense pressure to comply with CMMC 2.0 security standards. And let's be honest, finding a secure, easy-to-use file-sharing solution meeting those CMMC guidelines can be a major challenge. The federal government and federal system integrators supporting the Department of Defence, even they have had similar compliance requirements for improving cybersecurity and data protection. Defence contractors, why not fast-track your CMMC 2.0 compliance with Kiteworks? They are a FedRAMP moderate authorised solution. And did you know that Kiteworks supports nearly 90% of the security requirements for CMMC 2.0 Level 3? So please accelerate your CMMC 2.0 compliance and address federal zero trust requirements with Kiteworks' universal secure file sharing platform that's made for defence contractors. Simply visit kiteworks.com to get started. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to San Francisco, where today's guest is waiting to join us. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi, thank you for having me here. So my name is Uri Maoz. I'm the CEO for WireMock, a startup that optimizes developer productivity in an API-dependent environment by mocking your dependencies and creating an isolated environment. A bit about myself to give some context. I actually started my career as engineer and engineering manager in a company named Mercury. Then I moved to product management, and I actually did product management for a few years for product and application performance management space. And then I did what I like to usually call as a move to the dark side and move to sales. And what I was doing in the past 10 years is joining startup in very early stage, pre-revenue, and then building the entire sales organization and business for the company and scaling them from zero revenue to multi-million dollars. And around 2.5 years ago, I met Tom with my partner today, and we founded the WireMock together. Yeah, so I have experience across different aspects of the business by transitioning from running engineering to product management and then to sales, and now we're CEO of our own company.
And although you moved to the dark side, once an engineer, always an engineer, right? That stuff never leaves you.
Exactly. And also the entire products that I worked at are always technical products in the B2B space. So having the technical understanding and technical reliability when you talk with customers is really important. So coming from technical space really helps when running business.
And that's one of the many reasons I invited you on the podcast to join me today, because every day I take a different area in technology and try and demystify it, put it in a language everyone can understand. And the topic I wanted to talk about today in this age of APIs is API mocking. So can you introduce the listeners to what API mocking is, and maybe explain how API mocking enhances developer productivity, and maybe even bring it to life with some real-world examples that you've seen at WireMock Cloud. Anything you can share around that? Where do you want to begin?
I actually always try to begin with the problem.
Yeah.
I think it's always important to explain what is the problem that you're solving. And the problem is, you mentioned about API. API is everywhere. And the new normal, we like to say the new normal is API-driven. Developers today is a lot of APIs that they can use in the development process versus the monolithic application that you used to build in the past. And now you build an application and you have a lot of third-party APIs and internal APIs that you are using as a building blocks when you're building your app. So this is really good. But then the challenge comes when you actually have a lot of dependencies now, because you're a developer and you need to integrate a lot of third-party APIs to your app and internal APIs. We're not sure all of these APIs are ready or stable. So you have challenge. So if we are looking specifically on third-party APIs for a problem, you need to work with a lot of third-party API that you integrate into your app. And the third-party API, a lot of time, either you will not have access from the development environment, or maybe the third-party API charge you per API call, or maybe the third-party company will give you some sandbox to work with, but this sandbox is really not stable. And now you need to work with multiple sandbox from different companies, and every day a different sandbox will fail your process, and you need to understand what happened. And even if it is stable, then it's very, very hard to simulate like real-life scenarios, like doing load test with the sandbox or negative testing and so on. So this is one challenge. And also the other challenge that we see in the market is where you have challenges around parallel development. So I usually like to give an example. If you are a mobile team and you want to build a new functionality for the mobile app that is dependent on an API, and so you are sitting with the backend team and you are defining the API, but now the API is not ready. So the mobile team is actually sitting and waiting for the backend team to deliver the API, and the entire parallel work is not optimized and not working in a good way. So these are just two challenges that we see. And then the solution of API mocking is actually enable you to optimize your developer productivity by mocking, or some people call it virtualize, the APIs that you depend on. And then you can create an isolated environment that will enable you to run much faster in the development process. So if we take the challenge of the third-party API, by mocking all the third-party APIs, now you are creating an isolated environment. You have full control on the request and response that you have, and you can run fast in the development process without this dependency. So you are basically disconnecting this dependency for the development process. And if you're looking at the parallel development, then you are able to, like I said before, the mobile team and the backend team, so you will define the API, but now instead of waiting, even though the API does not exist yet, you will mock the API that is now being implemented, and the mobile team will be able to implement the mobile app against the mock, while the backend team is actually implementing the real backend.
And of course, application programming interfaces or APIs, as we've said, are absolutely everywhere. It's the way that two or more computer programs or components communicate with each other inside every single business, no matter what industry. And I'm curious, though, what are the various stages of that API lifecycle, and how can API mocking be applied effectively at each of those stages?
When you look on the life cycle of API, or the life cycle of software development life cycle, then you have the plan and design where you actually plan the API and design it. Then you want to develop and test. So develop the API, test it. You have the various teams that will work against this API. And then you have the deploy and onboarding, where you deploy the API and you want to onboard people on the API. And the way that we look at the mocking in WireMock, a lot of time mocking is kind of being related to the dev and test, where you are developing and testing. But we took an approach where we actually say, let's use mocking as an approach that we use in every aspect of the software development lifecycle in order to simplify complex processes. Okay, so for example, in the planning design, usually what companies will do if they need to design a new API, they will sit in some room, maybe again, getting back to the mobile team and backend team example before. So you will sit in a room together, maybe write some examples on the board, sketch some example on the board, and then you generate some document out of that. And later on now the backend team will go to implement the API based on this document that is kind of unstructured document. And the mobile team is working against that document as well. So this entire process is a bit cumbersome. So for example, here we have an approach where we are calling it mock-based API prototype or Figma for API design, where we are saying, okay, take the mocking as the examples that you're creating, just create the mocks as the example that are describing the API, some kind of prototyping that you're doing. And then from that, we will generate all the API specification and documentation portal that the team can work against that. So it really simplifies the API design process. Other areas where we apply mocking and we are kind of seeing that we are simplifying complex process are in the development and test. So for example, there is a practice called chaos engineering. Well, chaos engineering is a practice where you want the environment to fail in an unpredictable way, and you want to see how your application will behave with these failures. And there are chaos engineering tools in the tools, but they are very complex to use a lot of time, and it takes time to onboard on them. And we said, okay, let's take mocking, because mocking anyway is like on the network level, is doing simulation of request and response, and let's randomize faults on the network level and enable easy chaos engineering to check the resilience of your app in an environment where things are failing randomly. So these are just two examples where we are simplifying complex process using mocking, but there are other examples as well.
And I'm curious, where do you fit in all this? What's the story behind WireMock and its origins? As I believe it was an open source project to the development of the commercial edition and the implementation of PLG. Feel like there's a bit of a story there too.
Yeah, there is indeed. So Tom, my partner, actually created the open source project a while ago, WireMock. In the process, the project got quite a lot of traction in the market. If you look today on our open source metrics, we have millions of downloads every month, hundreds of contributors. The project itself is being used by thousands of other open source projects, and basically catching everywhere, and it has a lot of traction. And like I said, around 2.5 years ago, me and Tom joined, and I was very excited about the traction of the open source and about the potential of building solving a big problem here and building a big business. Plus, I was familiar with the challenge from my days, from my far days as engineer, and we decided to join forces and to found the WireMock, the company. And we founded WireMock, the company. We released WireMock Cloud on top of that, where WireMock Cloud is the commercial edition. And basically, we can add more details about it later, but basically we chose a model of open core, where we are actually adding more capabilities with the WireMock Cloud versus the open source, and focusing on really improving the experience for people that are using the open source. And in WireMock Cloud itself, we have a product-led motion. And so we have a free forever edition where people can just start using the product. It's very self-service. We'll have thousands of people that are using the product every month, register into the product. And they have like limited quota that they can work with, but it is free forever. It's being reset every month. We really believe in that. And at some point of time, they will get to some level where they are getting enough adoption and will say, okay, I want to buy the product.
And given your experience with both enterprise sales and product-led growth strategies, what do you see as the main differences and challenges between these approaches? I'm interested in your take here and how you see the differences.
Sure. So, one of the, I think, interesting thing about WireMock, the company, is kind of the synergy between Tom and myself, Tom in the open source world, myself coming from the enterprise motion, enterprise experience. And in general, like being able to combine the PLG and the enterprise motion themselves is a key for success of the company. And talking about like some changes or differences between PLG and enterprise sales. So in enterprise sales, a lot of time it's a top-down sale where you are working. You have like in many cases, especially in an early stage startup, you will be really focusing on generating meetings, what we call top of the funnel, and you will have a team of SDR, sales developer representative, that will call people and will try to convince them that they have a problem and come to a call. And the process is very, very hard in that sense. While in PLG, the motion is where you want the product to sell itself. And you need to have a good product and product that really fit the PLG motion in order to do that. But the idea is what I mentioned before, where you're doing free forever edition, and people will just register to the product. You will let them work with the product for a while. It can take months even that they will work with the product. And then at some point they will raise their hand because they want to buy the product. So it's a very different motion in how you run that. Also, in a lot of time, it's with enterprise sales, it will be focusing on large deals and for large companies and trying to close these large enterprise deals. While in the PLG, it's long tail, small deals, and doing a lot of filters on that, on all of that leads that are coming. And the focus will be on, I want to let people use the product and just come and raise their hand, like I said before. And the PLG basically also allows you usually to buy the product by yourself. And you will see a lot of companies that are offering the product for like $10 a month and things like that. And you can scale with that. So this is PLG versus enterprise sales. And there is the approach in the middle, which is called PLS, which is product-led sales, that actually enable, again, everyone to use the product by themselves. They are able to educate themselves about the product. They can get value from the product, from the free forever edition, but they will not be able to buy the product by themselves. So when they will be ready, then they will need to raise their hand and then come to a call with sales. And this is the motion that we are running. And we see that as a motion that really enable you to take the kind of the advantages of both worlds and really focusing on the getting and delivering values to customers at the time when they are ready to buy the product.
And before you came on the podcast, I was doing a little research, and one of the things that really stood out to me is that WireMock Cloud boasts quite a diverse client base, really, from IBM to NIH, OVO Energy, and Ingenico. Again, quite diverse. So how do you tailor your API developer productivity platform to meet the unique needs of such a varied lineup of organizations there? Do everybody have the same needs, or do you have to tailor make it for each individual or each individual business?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think that as a startup and in general, even not as a startup, you really need to be careful with platform play across vertical and make sure that you have the right product to do that. And the question that you should ask yourself when you're kind of planning to run such a motion is, do I need to understand the vertical specifically in order to deliver value? And if the answer is yes, then you should be very careful in going to such play, as you might spread too thin and it will be very hard for customer to get value from the product. Okay, so basically, if your product actually require understanding of the vertical and you will need like different capabilities in the product for vertical or different content and so on, or different go-to-market motions, it will be very hard to run such a business. And the thing is, and if the answer is no, then you have like a good platform play. And the thing about WireMock Cloud is that we have a very good platform play. Like you mentioned, we have customers across, I think, almost every vertical. And like I mentioned, the product is also self-service, so people are actually creating everything by themselves. And the key is that the users will have a platform, and the platform gives them the tools in order to very easily mock every API that they depend on. And it doesn't matter if the API that they are mocking is a financial organization that they are mocking, or a travel site that they are mocking, or an energy company that they need to mock. So the workflow will be the same. the request and response and flow will be the same, and there will not be any difference. And this is what enable us to actually run a platform play that is scalable and successful, and enable us to actually give the value across all the verticals that you mentioned that we are working with. I will give an example of an area where we are looking on being a bit more verticalized. We have in our product templates. So users can actually start from a template, and the template will be like, we have thousands of templates of different API, third-party APIs, and you can just kind of generate the mock from the template. And if you want now to kind of say, I want to generate now templates that are really certified for the healthcare, for example, or for open banking and so on, this is where you will need the vertical knowledge. And this is an area where we are kind of saying, okay, we need to be careful and we need to really know what we do if we will say that, okay, we have a solution for the healthcare and so on. But again, getting back to the core, with WireMock Cloud, it's a platform play, and it's enabled to get value across any vertical that you work with.
And I also read that you raised, I think it was $6.5 million in seed funding in an incredibly competitive space, and in an incredibly competitive space, which is also really impressive. So on behalf of startup founders listening around the world, what strategies and factors do you think contributed to that success? And is there any advice that you'd give to other startups that may be looking at following in your footsteps and seeking similar funding?
Sure. So yeah, I think that basically the key for us is that we had something real, and we were able to show good KPIs across the funnel. Like I mentioned, we had the open source that Tom worked on before. So there were good KPIs for the open source traction, but having good KPIs in the open source traction in this market is not good enough because a lot of open source companies, you will see that they have challenge in monetizing, and the VCs are quite concerned about monetization and the developer tool space and a lot of aspect around that. But for us, we were able to show, first of all, the good open source metrics, but also a good vision of how we will monetize on that, and what is our kind of story, and what is the platform story that we are going to develop. We were able to show like initial success of customers that actually scale from the open source and move to the commercial edition, and we're talking about the value that they are getting on that. So all of that enabled us to get the $6.5 million funding. And my advice to founders is, like I mentioned, being able to show as much traction as you can with low budget. A lot of time you will have some budget that you start even before the initial funding. So being able to show as much traction as you can with what you have so far, build the story very well, show how you can scale, especially in this market, which is very different than 3 years ago. And what is your monetization strategy, and really show that there is a good platform direction and any proof of the direction that you can show with the budget that you have so far.
And I think there are many open source software companies that often struggle with that monetization aspect. So how did you build a successful monetization strategy on top of WireMock's OSS framework? I'm curious here. You really seem to have struck gold with this.
Yeah. So yeah, like a lot of, like you mentioned, a lot of companies in the open source space have good open source traction, but then they have a challenge of monetization because everyone wants to have a free product eventually, especially when you're in the developer space and the developer doesn't like to pay. But I think this is also a key where my experience together with Tom was kind of working very well. And like I mentioned, we chose the open core model because there are various models to monetize on top of open source. If you sell support to the open source, or open core, where you are actually saying, okay, I'm giving core capabilities to the open source, but then I'm giving additional capabilities on top of the commercial edition. And the way that we build it, we actually defined that, first of all, we really believe in the open source, and we are investing a lot of efforts in the open source till today, adding a lot of content to the open source. There are a lot of stuff that we are adding to the open source first, and later on adding them to the commercial edition. There is always discussion about that. But the way that we position it is that the open source is the product or the tool where you're doing mocking, the basic mocking. But as you scale and you need like more serious scale, and you need like more capabilities to really optimize your developer productivity across the software development lifecycle, then you will move to WireMock Cloud. And this is the area where you will get, for example, all the stuff that I mentioned before around the QoS testing and the API, mock-based API prototype that we have, and contract testing, and a lot of other capabilities that exist in the commercial edition and does not exist in the open source. Okay, so the key is to still invest in the open source. You don't want to neglect the open source. And like I mentioned, there is a lot of stuff that we are adding in the open source and adding them first. A lot of time, things that will enable the individual developer to use the product in a sufficient way. And then on top of that, WireMock Cloud, like I mentioned, is the enterprise kind of developer productivity platform that really enable you to take your organization to the next phase. And we define the path to move from the open source to the commercial edition. So yeah, this is kind of this was the key for us. And indeed, we have been quite successful in moving a lot of enterprise companies to the commercial edition and to the enterprise edition. But yeah, you should always accept that there will be people that will still use your product for free and will get value, and we keep investing in that as well.
And I'm glad you mentioned the value because I think with any new tech solution, businesses are now increasingly focusing on ROI and what measurable, tangible benefits will this bring me. So what would you say are the most significant productivity gains that you've observed in developers that use the WireMock API developer productivity platform? And how is it addressing the dependencies on third-party APIs and microservices? I'd love to hear more about those measurable benefits and difference it's making.
Yeah, so by using mocking across the different aspects of the software developer lifecycle, you really take your productivity of the organization to the next phase. And the nice thing is that we have some very clear ROI numbers. So if you are looking on the save development times, we have customers like Jumia, for example, which is an e-commerce company that is talking about the fact that they had really high challenge in parallel the work of the front team and the backend team, and they were able to save like 3 weeks of dev time every iteration. So reducing kind of dev time cost, increasing velocity, and reduce time to market. We have customers that are talking about the fact that they are reducing testing environment cost because you need to test somehow. So you will have like a lot of time testing environment that it's very hard to maintain them. It's very costly to maintain them. I was just talking with the customer and he was telling me that he thinks that the testing environment cost is actually higher than the production environment. So by using mocking, they are able to meaningfully reduce the cost of that. So reducing the cost, which is also an important factor, especially these days where everyone trying to reduce cost. More stability in build and testing, enable better quality software. We're talking about customers that are reducing bug escape rate and increasing the product quality by using the QoS testing and testing stuff that would otherwise be discovered in production. So all of these things are really enhancing developer productivity and also increasing the quality of your software because you are able to develop and test in a much more stable way. Plus, with the dependencies, by disconnecting your dependencies, you can have much more autonomy when you are actually running your development and less dependency on other people that need to deliver stuff and you are waiting for them.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights on the importance of this topic and demystifying it, putting a language everyone can understand. But before I let you go, I'm going to ask you to leave one final gift for everyone listening, and that is either a book that means something to you that we can add to our Amazon wish list, or a song for our Spotify playlist. Guilty pleasures are allowed, but what would you like to leave everyone with and why?
I will choose the book, and I will choose the Sales Acceleration Formula by Mark Roberts, And the reason that I'm kind of choosing this book is that I really basically is the person that joined the HubSpot when it was very early stage, and the HubSpot the CRM tool. So he joined when it was very early stage, and he built the entire business for the company. And he's telling in the book how he joined this company without any experience in sales before, and his background was in engineering. And he's telling how he got to be a sales leader in a small startup that way, and how he tackled the sales problem from an engineering background, really kind of, creating some methods that are engineering based in order to run the sales process by numbers and so on. And first of all, I really resonated with this journey because I had like similar journey from engineering to sales. And joining also like a very early startup, stage startup in order to found the business. And second, it's a very practical book. You see a lot of books in the sales area where it's very high level and sometimes give less value. And this book is really practical and gives a lot of good tools in order to run the sales organization and really scale the company in an efficient way. Which I really like. And I really recommend it, to people, even engineers, to learn about such move and see how people are moving from engineering and kind of go out of the box for engineering and see how other processes are working.
Absolutely love it. I'll get that added to our Amazon wish list. And for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more information about WireMock Cloud, or even ask you or your team any additional questions, where would you like to point everyone listening?
Yeah, so we are trying to be quite active in the social channels. So we have a lot of social channels in LinkedIn, Twitter, and so on. So we'll be glad if people will follow us. We will just released, by the way, something quite nice. We call it a Spot the Mock game that enable you that we are releasing a game every 2 weeks where people need to find the differences between two images, and there are prizes for that. We call it Spot the Mock. So we are doing also some fun stuff like that. We have our website. So there are two websites for WireMock, wiremock.org and wiremock.io, which is the commercial edition. We kept separation between the product. We have sessions like WireMock Live, where we are publishing, like we are doing technical sessions every few weeks about product capabilities, webinars that we are doing, and so on. So yeah, the best way is to follow us in LinkedIn or Twitter or any other channel, or kind of, look at our website and get the details from there.
Awesome. Well, I'll add everything there. And we covered so much in a short amount of time, from the importance of API mocking, how it helps to improve developers' productivity, and also how to apply API mocking in different aspects of that API lifecycle, and also, of course, getting to hear the magnificent story behind WireMock too. But more than anything, just thank you for sharing your insights and your story with me today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was fun.
And as we wrap up today's episode, I think it's clear that API mocking is more than just a tool. It's a game changer for developers. And my guest journey from WireMock Cloud, I think, highlights the power of innovation and strategic application in transforming complex processes into seamless experiences. Whether that be reducing development time and testing costs, or increasing autonomy or development velocity, WireMock seems to be setting new standards in this field. So thank you to today's guests for giving me a glimpse into the future of API development. But what are your thoughts on API mocking? Have you experienced the impact in your projects? As always, share your thoughts, join the conversation by simply emailing me techblogwriter@outlook.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn just at Neil C. Hughes. But that's it for today, so thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you'll join me again tomorrow, but until next time, don't be a stranger.